Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SOAR webinar on the SOAR Medical Summary Report. Today's webinar is presented by the SAMHSA SOAR Technical Assistance Center at Policy Research Associates under contract to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration of the Department of Health and Human Services. My name is Kristen Lupfer, Project Director of the SOAR TA Center, and I will be moderating today's event. One of the key elements of the SOAR approach to completing Social Security disability benefits applications is the use of the 5 critical components. The components of application assistance include using the SSA 1696 Appointment of Representative form, collecting and submitting medical records, writing and submitting a medical summary report, the MSR, the topic of today's webinar, a co-signature on that MSR by a qualified physician, and then completing a quality review of applications prior to submission. SOAR outcomes from across the country have proven that the use of these components significantly increases the likelihood of an approval for those who are eligible. Analysis of over 3,500 applications that were recorded in our online application tracking system, OAT, we found that the MSR has an important impact on outcomes. It significantly increased the likelihood of approval by about 10%, and for you statisticians with a p-value of less than 0.001. And further, applicants who had a co-signed medical summary were significantly more likely to be approved for benefits than those without a co-signed medical summary. So approximately 15% more applicants were approved than applicants without that co-signature. So this really suggests that the combination of both the MSR and co-signature by a physician will produce the best chances of being approved. So what is your takeaway from this statistical analysis? We want you to listen carefully to this webinar because you'll be learning key skills for supporting successful SSI and SSDI applications. A few housekeeping items before we begin. The webinar is being recorded and will be available for download on the SOAR website in about a week or sometime sooner. Your lines are going to be muted throughout the webinar. Right now, you can download the PowerPoint slides to view following the webinar, or if you would like to take notes on them. So if you look at the top of your screen, you can go to File and Save Document, and that'll save the PowerPoint for you. You can also access the file by following the SOAR website that's at the bullet right here. Actually, we forgot to update it, so that's a SOAR webinar employment. It would be SOAR webinar MSR, but if you go to the webinars tab on the front page of the SOAR website, that button there, you'll get to it. It'll be the first one. Sorry about that. So at the conclusion of the webinar, you'll be directed to a link for an online evaluation, and we really value and appreciate your feedback, and we use it to improve and inform our future SOAR webinars and activities. So we really do ask you to take a moment and complete it immediately following the webinar. Get your plate there. Briefly review our learning objectives and the agenda for today. Our national experts are going to introduce you to the importance of the SOAR Medical Summary Report and what it entails. You'll learn ways that you can use the MSR to help support SSI and SSDI applications you submit, and you'll gain access to worksheets, samples, and other tools to help support the reading of an MSR. We'll begin today with an overview of the Medical Summary Report from Jen Elder, Project Associate here at Policy Research Associates. We'll continue with 2 presenters who will discuss interviewing for and writing the Medical Summary Report. Amanda Torrell, Entitlement Specialist with the 11th Judicial Criminal Mental Health Project in Miami, Florida, and Daniel Perry, the BEST Team Lead at Central City Concern in Portland, Oregon. Then invite Brad Stanley, Medical Relations Officer with the Disability Determination Services in Birmingham, Alabama, to share a perspective from the Alabama DDS. We will end the session with a question and answer period facilitated by the SOAR TA Center. We'll get questions on how to ask questions at that end. I'd like to ask a quick poll question to gauge where you all are coming from. And I'd like to know, have you ever written a SOAR medical summary report? So you choose no, yes, less than 5, yes, more than 5, or you're making plans to in the future. And that's why you're on this call, learning more about it. Sometimes it takes a minute with the polls, but the poll should pop up for you. And particularly with PRA, did the poll pop up?
We are on it.
Oh, okay, great, okay. Wish I wasn't missing it. Thank you all for bearing with us. So you need to respond to the poll. There it goes. We had people responding in the Q&A. So if you could answer the poll box here. Five seconds, get your answer marked. I'm going to close the poll. Here we go. And it takes a minute it's doing its calculations. I'm just going to tell where we are. Looks like about a third of you have not done an MSR yet. A bunch of you have done kind of few MSRs. We've got some experts on the call today, and then a number of you who are making plans to use the MSR in the future. So that's great. We really hope that what you learned today will help encourage you to start writing MSRs if you aren't already, and help you improve the reports that you're already working on. I'm going to hand it over to Jen Elder, who will begin her overview of the MSR. Jen.
Thanks. Can you hear me? Perfect. I think I was talking into the silence. So as Kristen said, I'm Jen Elder, and I work for the SOAR TA Center. And today I'm just going to provide a pretty brief overview of the SOAR Medical Summary Report to give you the basic structure and the bones of what we're talking about. And then Daniel and Amanda are going to come and provide some really great details as to about gathering the information for this report. So as Kristen said, the MSR is so important to us at the SOAR TA Center because we statistically see that it makes a difference on approvals. And so it's not just one more thing that we're asking you to do. We know that Social Security applications have a lot of different parts, but it wants to make a real impact on that application. And so if there's one thing that you can do to help increase the likelihood of an approval, this is it. So I'm really glad that everybody's joined us today. USICH, the VA, Social Security, and SAMHSA have all recognized the importance of the MSR as well. And so this was really exciting to us this summer when they released a report in July called Key Strategies for Connecting Individuals Experiencing Homelessness to SSI and SSDI. And of course, they talked a lot of, SOAR critical components, but they specifically mentioned the MSR. So if you haven't had a chance to see that document, I recommend you go to USICH's website and pull it up and see emphasis they gave to the MSR. In communities, our medical summary reports, because they're so comprehensive, can often take the place of the 3373 function report. This is a report that is often sent out to you by DDS when you're helping someone with an application. So encourage you to check with local office, check with your local SOAR leads, see if maybe the MSR take the place of this form. What is it, or how important it is? What is the MSR? So basically, it's a letter that describes the individual and his or her functional limitations and struggles. You know, DDS and Social Security, when you're giving the medical records to them and they're reading that, it does tell the whole story. You know, there's so many times we've just seen medical records that say patient stable, but that doesn't tell you very much. It doesn't tell you how they're able to take care of their daily needs. Do they have trouble walking? Do they have, are they exhibiting symptoms of mental illness when you're interviewing them? A lot of medical records aren't going to provide this level of detail. So this is what you're able to do. We're empowering you to write this MSR and provide all of those great details. Through that, it helps DS see the person that you're working with. It helps connect the applicant's functional limitations and the symptoms of their mental illness, which is critical for Social Security. And it'll question, why is the applicant unable to work? Through SAR, we're going to show that they're unable to work to a substantial gainful level as a result of the symptoms of their illness. This could be a medical impairment, mental health condition, or a combination of conditions. Comes medical evidence when co-signed by a physician or a psychologist, and it's submitted to Social Security or DDS according to your local SOAR process. So at the end or throughout the webinar, we'll have links to our SOAR website, and you'll be able to find your local SOAR lead and find out the process in your area. So the content of the MSR, we'll go through each of these, give us overview. The top one, reference section, that's just the applicant's name, date of birth, and Social Security number. I know that sounds very basic to say, but it's sometimes overlooked, and we want to make sure that all of your hard work actually makes it to the correct applicant's file. So the introduction section, this is your, to kick off the paper and really to give an overview for how the applicant meets the Social Security disability criteria. The DDS is never going to meet this applicant in person, so it's up to you to paint a picture for how they look. How are they dressing? Is it appropriate to the season? Have they not changed their clothes in the couple months that you worked with them? Is that related to a symptom of their illness? All of these unique observations that you have are perfect to document here in the introduction. Talking about behavior and mannerisms helps give insight to how their symptoms may be impairing their ability to function day to day. Diagnoses up front, all of the mental health and all of the physical health diagnoses is important because it helps DS quickly see what listings the applicant may meet. And our whole purpose of this is helping DDS examiner see the individual as you do. So to get to the personal history section. Now with this, we want to give just a brief overview of their background. And those that we want to provide are those that relate to the current diagnoses and functioning. So you don't need to know what their Uncle Jim did in maybe every house that they lived in as a child. Sometimes there's a tendency to say absolutely everything you know about the applicant because you've worked with them and you know their story and you want to tell everything about them. But make sure that this section stays concise and really focuses on how did any trauma they've experienced, education they've had, how is that affecting the current functioning? So it's important to know what the last grade they completed. To have any struggles? Do they have any struggles with maybe reading or writing? Employment history is so critical. Again, we're why the applicant is not able to work. So it's good a little bit of extra time in this employment history section. Describe past jobs. How long did they stay? What did they do? What were their struggles? If you can get permission to talk to former employers, that is so important here because you're able to get great quotes or even full employer statements as to how they struggled on the job and the accommodations that the employer made for their illnesses. So with this personal history section, it can touch on any little history that they may have had as it relates to their illnesses. So say someone was experiencing severe paranoia or mania, and maybe they, as a result, they were picked up by police and were incarcerated or hospitalized. That's critical information for Social Security to know. Also, it's important to include a section on substance use. So we don't want to hide any substance use. We want to talk about it, and we want to get more information as to why does the applicant use. How do they feel? Do they experience symptoms while sober? Because Social Security wants to see is that if you take away the substance use, that they still have a disabling condition, that they're still experiencing the symptoms of mental illness or physical health issues. And treatment section. We want to talk again about psychiatric and physical health conditions. We say a lot. Applicants can be approved based on a combination of conditions, so it's important that we're comprehensive. We want to talk about everything that's going on so DDS can explore that, maybe order some other tests if need be. We'd like to organize this chronologically. We want to, help walk DDS through the records that you're going to provide. Sometimes we have hundreds of pages of records, and I like to think of this section as just a roadmap for DDS through records. What are the important signposts? For me, those are, years of treatment at certain providers, their diagnoses, the medications that they were prescribed, and any context behind the treatment. So, they in the hospital, why they have this interaction with the emergency room. Things are really important, and it helps give DDS a picture of how the illness has progressed over time. Our current mental status exam, that's exam within the last 90 days, that can really help the applicants and help avoid any consultative exams, so we can show the diagnosis is current. Very critically, the link to functional impairment. It's so important to connect the symptoms of the illness with marked functional impairment. So it's not enough to say, they're impaired in these things, they have trouble with the areas, but why? Is it because they're experiencing severe depression? Is that why maybe they isolate themselves or are unable to take care of themselves? So we want to, to the extent possible, address in all 4 functional areas. We go to a lot more depth about those areas online course, so we won't go in depth on them now, but the critical thing to take away is addressing all 4 of those areas is important. Medication, the effects of that, the side effects, if they have, maybe medicine makes them so sleepy that they're able to work for more than an hour at a time. That's great information to know. Do they need a lot of support? So maybe they're able to do well in housing, say a permanent supportive housing placement, but it's because they have a case manager who comes over every day and helps them with tasks. They have someone who takes them to the store. That's really important for Social Security to know, to see how many accommodations are being made for the patient. So making the link, this is our whole job is with the MSR. Why can applicants not work or engage in substantial gainful activity, which in case I didn't define that at the beginning, but that's quantified as working and earning $1,090 a month in 2015. And that number does change every year, so keep an eye out for that. So someone may be able to work, but why unable to work and earn that? And a very brief summary just helps tie together the main pieces of the evidence. You want to put your contact name and number, and a signature by the case manager yourself. You want to make sure you sign the report that you write, and leading physician or psychologist if that's possible. So we have a couple tools that I'll just briefly point you to from the SOAR TA Center. And one is the Medical Summary Report Interview Guide. And it's comprehensive, but it contains what we think are pretty much most of the questions you might need to know or ask in order to gather the information for this report. By no means do you have to ask every single question on this guide, but we want to, help provide some ideas for when you're interviewing with somebody. They're open-ended. That helps you gather a lot of information, and importantly, a lot of quotes. And quotes can be very strong evidence in medical summary reports. The functional questions, which I hadn't touched on, is distinguishing between access and ability. Will show that individual has impairments in their functioning as a result of symptoms of their illness rather than lack of access. So somebody isn't able to shower because they're experiencing homelessness. So is it because they don't have a shower, or perhaps their paranoia is so much that they're unable to go to the day center where there are showers because they can't be around people? So it would be lack of access, but we want to kind of dig deeper with our questions to see is it lack of ability due to the illness? Because that's what's going to fit the criteria for Social Security. We, at the end of the interview guide, have a medical summary report template. We received feedback from the SOAR TA Center about just needing to know where to start. What are the main headings? And so we provided this for you. We recommend that you write it on your own agency letterhead, and of course, delete all of the helpful guidance that we included under the headings. This gives you a basic template to organize the information. Maybe when you're interviewing, you take notes in these sections as you ask the questions, and then go type it up as a letter. So that's a tool for you to use. We have sample MSRs available on our website. It's in the library. It's a quick screenshot. We organized them sort of by listing, by disorder, and so sometimes it'd be helpful to know how someone else might have, what types of information they gathered, how did they organize their information. So that's with many thanks to members of our SOAR community for sending those in, but the identifying information has been taken out of them. We also will review any redacted MSR letters and provide feedback upon request. So if you're working on MSR and you'd like us to take a look at it, you can send that to your SOAR TA Center liaison. Just be sure that you take out the applicant's name, Social Security number, and date of birth, because we want to make sure that we're all following HIPAA guidelines there. And we'll get you feedback with no more than 2 business days. Okay. So that was my section. So I think I'm handing it back over to Kristen.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. That was great. So we're going to do another quick poll question for you guys. See if you're paying attention out there in cyberspace. So we want to know, true or false, the medical summary report is an untested strategy, and we're not really sure of its importance in supporting applications. A few seconds to answer this one. All right, close the poll. Let's see how you guys did. WebEx scores. So most of you got that right, and so it looks like you were listening well. So that's correct, that the medical summary report is a proven strategy. It is statistically significant, improving SOAR outcomes. So it definitely makes a difference. All right, thank you guys. Next presenter, Amanda Torrell, Entitlement Specialist with the 11th Judicial Criminal Mental Health Project, Miami, Florida, will talk about her tips for interviewing for and writing the MSR. Amanda?
Hello?
Yep, we've got you now.
Okay, great. Everyone, as Kristen said, I'm an entitlement specialist with the 11th Judicial Circuit Criminal Mental Health Project in Miami. I'm part of the SOAR team here, so I'm one of 3 full-time staff that do SOAR 40 hours a week. So we've become familiar with the process. I'm going to share some tips with everyone about what we do, what works for us in writing an MSR. And I just want to preface this with saying that our clientele are diagnosed with a major mental illness. So most of these tips and things are geared towards clients with those types of diagnoses. We don't really work much with individuals that have severe medical diagnoses or physical impairments, like things like that. So for interviewing, first thing is a face-to-face interview is always better. If, you know, we've had clients that are maybe in state hospitals that are elsewhere that have been referred to our program, and situations like that, if they're nowhere near us, then, you know, we do what we can to do it through somebody else, a treatment team or over the phone. But if you can, a face-to-face interview is really best for building rapport and getting a better perspective of the client. The environment is also really key with interviewing, which those of you who have been through the SOAR training probably saw some videos on that. And I think it's best to be able to arrange a time and place that works best for both you and the client. You both want to be comfortable. You're going to be asking a lot of questions of the client, and you want them to be comfortable to share this information with you that you need for the MSR. People may not be able to get to where you are, so don't assume that they can come to you, or arrange, maybe you need to go to them, or whatever works for both of you. Also try to preface the interview with clients with this, explaining exactly what it is that we're doing. They're aware that, you know, we're here to help them apply for Social Security, and we've explained the SOAR process to them. Try to go a little bit into detail and say what kind of things we're looking for, what information we need, you know, about their history, about their psychiatric history, about their employment. And some people may not be so comfortable with that right off the bat. So I try to make you aware that these are the types of things that we're going to be talking about, just to give them kind of a little heads up of what we're going to be discussing in an interview. I do usually tell the clients that it is better to have more information so that, like was mentioned before, DDS can get a full picture of this individual that they're never going to meet. However, if someone is not comfortable talking about something, I always stress the fact that it's okay. And if they are uncomfortable, to just tell me and we can move on. I don't want anybody to be uncomfortable discussing something that they don't want to. Interview questions. When I started, I used a lot of the SOAR worksheets in the toolbox that's on the SOAR website. I put a link there. Hopefully it works. I actually would take those worksheets with me, and I know it's a lot of questions and I would never get through all of them, but it really kind of helped guide the interview as to what questions were necessary to get the information. I would also recommend reading those worksheets ahead of time so that you're not taken off guard by the questions that you may be asking that you weren't expecting to ask, or something of that nature. And it may be uncomfortable to ask someone about trauma they've experienced, or what happened with that last job, why they got fired, or something like that. So get comfortable that you may be uncomfortable. Also, letting the client talk. I think a lot of the times when I use the worksheets, I wanted to stay in order and ask the questions the way that it was on the worksheet, but sometimes it's better just to kind of let the client talk, and it may seem like they're going off topic and providing information that you don't need, but I mentioned earlier, quotes are really good from the client, and they may say things that could really benefit your summary, even if it's not in order of the questions that you're asking. A lot of times what you say is really relevant, even though it's not what you intended to talk about at that time. But having those worksheets in front of you can keep you kind of on track. So if you do get off topic and discussing something, you can refer back to your worksheets and figure out what information you need from there. Language and social cues are really big also. I am in an office with other people, and at times some interviews are happen here. The client says, sure, no problem, I'm comfortable coming there, but then sitting with them and you realize that they're looking at everybody that walks past the table, or they start to get quiet when other people come into the room. So you really have to pay attention to those things to see, are they really comfortable? They said they were going to be, but that may not be the case once they get in the situation. So if a client is, we've had people falling asleep, or if they're looking down, or if they're scanning the room, those kind of things aware of, so that are they really paying attention? Are they able to provide the best information possible that you're going to need for MSR, or is maybe now not the best time? Maybe you should schedule an interview for another time, or ready to be willing to talk to you. Which brings to the next point, that you should be comfortable with multiple interviews. That, like I said, some people have good days and bad days. Some people are just not interested at that time. Maybe something happened before they got to your appointment, and they're just not so into it. Even to help them, we all have good days and bad days, and might not be the best day. So a lot of times, going back to what I said before, when you the interview with telling everybody, this is what we're going to be talking about, and these are the questions I'm going to be asking. Some people not be comfortable just meeting you for the first time and answering these questions about their history and trauma and things like that. So the first interview may be just to build rapport, and then maybe next time you can get the information you need for the MSR. I want to discuss taking notes. Some clients are not comfortable watching write while they talk. So we tend to ask the clients up front, are you okay if I take notes? I want to remember what was talked about. I want to remember what was said so that I have all of the right information to write the best report possible to benefit your application. And most people are okay with it once you discuss it with them. But sometimes if nothing is said and you just start writing, people get a little apprehensive and maybe stop sharing information at that point because they want to see what you're writing, and they're uncomfortable with the fact that you just started writing in the middle of your interview. That should also be on what the client is saying in addition to what you observe. So if the client tells you, goes into the next point, not taking everything at face value, if the client is telling you, no, I don't hear voices, no, that never happened to me before, but in the middle of your interview, you see them turning to the corner and having what looks like a conversation with themselves, or appearing to be responding to some sort of internal stimuli. So you can't always take what they say as factual. You need to write down what you observe and how the client's presenting to you as well. I would interview any available support system that the client has. Some people have anyone to talk to, but some people have family in the area or available by phone. Some people rely strictly on our treatment team, and I would definitely make a point to ask them, the client, if they're comfortable with you speaking to their support. Is it okay if I call mom to ask her about your history, or is it okay if I talk to your treatment team about how you're doing at program, and things like that, because those individuals can give you a third-party perspective, which is also something that DDS may ask for. So it's really helpful to get information not only from the client, but from anybody else that may know information about the client. So to writing the MSR, I would strongly suggest that when you offer an interview, to also schedule time that's after interview to be able to write the MSR. It should be fresh in your head. It'll make it easier to write the report. If you don't schedule a time, and everybody knows things come up at work and you end up doing something else, and then before you know it, it could be a long period of time before you start writing and you don't remember what was said. Maybe you can't understand your own notes. I would say definitely to schedule a time to write the MSR right after you do the interview. It also will allow you enough time to have it completed so that you can have it prepared for a doctor's signature and to send to DDS when it's at that point. We already talked about using quotes, that it allows DDS to see the client from their own perspective. Again, because DDS is never going to meet the client, this kind of helps show the client's insight, whether they have some or not. We also use a lot of medical records for our MSR. We have them on hand while we're writing. Also make sure to note the MSR if this information is coming from the medical records. And you can see I wrote an example there. We'd say, according to records from Jackson Memorial Hospital, the client has been admitted 4 times in the last year for inpatient psychiatric hospitalization, or something along those lines. We use a lot of the information from the medical records because we have clients at times that have 500, 600, 700 pages of medical records. So if we can take little snippets that we feel are important and write it in this report, it may come as easier to read rather than when ES has to come across those 500 pages and go through all of that. As we said before, interviewing the support system and the treatment team, write their responses as well throughout the report, wherever it's relevant. At this time, you also want to make sure that you're writing that this information came from, whether it's the client's mother or treatment team or whomever, so that DDS can see your MSR where you're getting all of this information from. MSR should be clear and concise. I don't want to give too much detail in each category, and we'll talk soon about what categories we feel like are best to focus on. But again, this should be concise. I think we keep up to usually about 4 to 5 pages. Send a document that's like 9, 10 pages. It's the purpose in a sense because we're trying to fill in the gaps and give a concise report about what's happening, what's from the medical records, from the client, all of those things that may not be documented. So we try to keep it as short as possible, but giving all the pertinent information. We try not to use medical jargon because it may be confused and unknown to the person reading it. We use examples of the symptoms instead of just listing the symptoms. I think Jen touched on that earlier. And making the link, we explain how the symptoms affect the person's ability to function. So we really link throughout the MSR. And we're finished with the MSR. We try to get a second opinion. Luckily here we have a SOAR team of 3 people, so we bounce ideas off of each other. If you know anybody else who is familiar with the SOAR process, I would definitely recommend communicating with them to see if they'd be willing to read your MSR. Or a supervisor, a coworker, maybe someone who doesn't know the client so they can give you their impression of the client once they're done reading it because they haven't met them, which is this scenario is DDS. Or someone who does know the client also so that they can kind of see maybe, oh, talk about this, or, oh, this is a good description of them, and kind of get some feedback on that. MSR sections to focus on, Jen discussed that most of the initial sections, like the background information and the employment, should all be brief, but it should be pertinent information to discuss the client and what's happening and a better picture of the client. But we do focus a lot on the psychiatric history. Again, most of our clients, or all of our clients, have a mental health diagnosis. We don't usually work with individuals with physical or so we focus a lot on the psychiatric history and also talk about the functional information. I liked what Jen said about a roadmap for DS because we kind of do the same thing. We use bullet points in the section to kind of list all the facilities and clinics and programs that the client has been to or received services from. If it's a long list of like 20-something places, then obviously we do put that in a paragraph form. But if it's 4 or 5 places, we try to put it in bullet form and just give a few sentences about each place, whether it's information from what the client told us while receive services there, or whether it's from the medical records, or maybe you talk to the treatment team from that facility and you could write something that they informed you about while the client receives services there. We write pertinent information like the diagnosis and medication information in a logical order, just to show how far back this impairment has been present, because not only do we need to show that the client is unable to work right now, but we also need to show that this impairment has either been here for at least 12 months or that it's expected to be here for at least 12 months and impair their ability to work. The functional information, as was mentioned before, we write as much information as we can for all of the 4 areas of functioning. And try to relate it to the questions from the function report that is often requested by DDS. So we've gotten familiar with that report. We've been asked to do that report quite often. So we kind of use some of the questions from there and the examples and things that they give on that report, like does the individual spend time with other people? And we would put the response to that in the social functioning question, or in the social functioning section, I'm sorry. So this tends to be a very extensive section of our MSR, and we put a lot of detail into each of the 4 sections to really give a good picture of what's going on and how their function is impaired. So again, we make the link, symptoms, the limitations in functioning for that particular area of functioning, how it impairs their ability to work. Providing this information often eliminates the need for the functional reports. A lot of times the educator that we are working with will say, I don't need the report, all of your information on the MSR answers the questions and gives the information that we need. We also make sure to advise the adjudicator that there's a SOAR claim and that we have an MSR, and kind of explain to them what is included in this MSR if they're unaware. We have worked with adjudicators that don't know what SOAR is and have never seen an MSR, so they may not be aware that there is pertinent information that they're going to be asking for, like the function report. So we need to make that clear with everyone. Getting a cosignature, we tend to work with facilities here quite often, so we've kind of built a rapport with psychiatrists in the community, but there's always clients who go to a psychiatrist that we don't normally work with. So when we meet with the client initially, we try to reach out to the psychiatrist after so that they can be familiar with what we're doing. We let them know what this MSR thing is that we're working on and that we're helping the client with benefits. And let them know that we speaking to them again. If they're willing to work with us and review the MSR and sign it, and to have good feedback with that. If the first time we're speaking to the psychiatrist is the first time when we need the signature, it doesn't tend to go over very well. So we try to give a big explanation of the purpose of the MSR and how it would be very beneficial to have their signature because it holds more weight because it's medical evidence. So communicate with the psychiatrist and have their input also once they review it. If they would like to add something or take something away, we definitely work with them on that. If you can't reach a psychiatrist or you feel that they're not being receptive, we definitely work with the treatment team. You know, sometimes case managers have more rapport. They work with the same facility as a psychiatrist, so we try to work smarter. If we're unable to talk to them directly, we will attempt to work with the treatment team to see how they can assist in this. If the client is seeing somebody other than an MD, we've had some difficulty with this because of the Social Security standards for what they consider is a mental health professional. So we do have the treating physician sign no matter who they are, but we also try to communicate with them to see who else would be able to co-sign. A lot of times we have clients that work with ARNPs and they work under an MD, so with the ARNP signature, we may be able to also get the MD signature. It just takes a little bit more work. If you don't get an MD signature, if you're unable to for whatever the reason is, I definitely suggest submitting it anyways because it's still really good information. The functional information is really what's needed for DDS. So even if it becomes too difficult to get the signature, I would definitely suggest still submitting it. That's it.
Thanks, Amanda. Your experience and passion for this work really shines through. So thank you so much for sharing your tips. So our next presenter, Daniel Perry, is the Best Team Lead at Central City Concern in Portland, Oregon. And they will share what they do at best to stay in the top 10 SOAR states for SOAR approval. Daniel.
Thanks, Kristen. Can you hear me? Okay, great. So like Kristen said, my name is Daniel Perry, and I'm the team lead at the BEST program, which stands for the Benefits and Entitlement Specialist Team. And we are a program that is based on the SOAR model, and currently we have 8 full-time benefit specialists, and it's all we do as a program for the week. Just kind of as an initial disclaimer, so my background is not clinical. I know I think writing MSRs can sometimes seem a little bit intimidating if you feel like you aren't qualified, but I definitely wasn't qualified going into this. I studied history in school, and sometimes I like to joke that I'm actually using my history major more than I ever thought I would, because I'm doing research, I'm interviewing primary sources, and then I'm producing essentially what is a thesis. So I'm still using my expertise. It's just not quite the clinical side that other people in my field might be using. So I'm going to start by just mentioning how BEST uses MSRs, just a quick overview. So as Jen said, our MSRs, we have a special relationship with our DDS, Disability Determination Services in Oregon. And our MSRs take the place of the functional report, the SSA 3373, that DDS normally requests for applicants, which was really helpful. It cuts down on our work, and also it allows us to focus on the areas of functioning that we think are important, whereas that form sometimes it just has limited space and be a lot of work going through it with claimants. So we find that really helpful. And then the big thing that we do, it focuses on just supplementing the medical records. One of the things that the MSR does is connects functioning to the medical conditions and impairments. And we can, by kind of writing that and focusing on the areas that we want to, we can really fill in gaps from records where we think that there may be some missing information, or different medical providers have said different things because they haven't been engaged with the claimants for very long. And this kind of helps to clarify the differences between treating sources. And I think really the biggest thing that we focus on is just, have we painted a picture of who this person is? As has been mentioned before, DDS is never going to sit down and meet with the claimants that we're working with, and so we want to make sure that our MSRs are, get all-around picture for the people that we're working with. They're struggling, including lots of observations about their mannerisms and facial expressions and attitude and behavior, so that we can make sure that the analyst knows all of that information. So to start to talk about kind of pre-interview stuff, this is what I'm going to do before I even sit down with the person to get the information. And just as another disclaimer, the way our process works is by the time I'm at this stage, I've actually met with the person generally at least 1 or 2 times to kind of do a meeting where I'm screening them for a program, and also a meeting where I'm kind of signing on as a client, as their representative, and getting them enrolled into the program. So I had a couple short meetings with someone at this point, and then really getting prepared to sit down and have a really in-depth functional meeting. It's going to last a lot longer and be a lot more personal. Before I do that, I'm going to make sure, if possible, that I've had a chance to review all of the medical records that I have, and I definitely recommend that. I think having some information beforehand and knowing what records are out there, what they're saying, what the diagnoses are, it can be really helpful. And things that I'm looking for when I'm reviewing those records is, what is missing? What am I seeing in those first couple meetings that I'm not seeing in the medical records? Like what functional information is missing? What diagnoses might be different? Where are there huge gaps in treatment, so that I know to ask the claimant about those gaps? I'm also looking to get a sense, I want to try to determine maybe a potential onset date. And this is not something that I can just review their medical records and really see without talking to the person, but I want to see, when these conditions starting according to the medical records, because I want to see if that's going to be different from what I learn later in the interview. So I think, knowing when conditions potentially started can really guide how far back I go when I'm talking to the claimant. Are the medical records showing that this is a very clear condition that started a few years ago, in particular with medical conditions? Or is this something that's been going on for a long time and I need to maybe go back with the client, up to 20 years ago and just get a little bit more information? So it kind of guides how in detail I'm going to be getting at certain points. This has been mentioned, but just really becoming familiar with the questions. At best, we have kind of our own adapted worksheets with questions, and they have space on it for writing answers. And so, doing this for a few years, I'm very familiar with the questions that I've laid out for myself. And I generally know going in, which questions I'm going to just skip over, which questions I'm going to really focus in on and write the most about. And so I think, do a little homework ahead of time can really, I think, help you figure out which questions are most important to ask. So before the interview, titled Setting the Mood, so you really, I think, want to be very intentional about the setting that you're meeting in. I think, as I said, it's really helpful to meet in person. Every person I've written an MSR for, I've met in person. I think that's just a privilege that I've had in my program and working with folks only in my county. I haven't had to deal with long-term contact, or long-distance contact, rather. So I always meet in person, and I think it's best frequently to meet one-on-one. I know some people really want a family member, like a partner or a mother, to join. Some people want their case manager or another advocate to join. And while I don't always eliminate that, there are definitely some cases where I think the person really benefits from having a calming presence from their mother or someone else. So I definitely allow people, I want them first and foremost to be comfortable. But if possible, I try to encourage that this be a meeting with just two of us. And I found that I get a lot different information when I'm meeting just one-on-one. I think people, when they're with someone else, they maybe feel like they need to make themselves sound better, or they're trying to gloss over parts of their life, or some of their actions. They try to focus on justifying it rather than just kind of giving me the information that I need. And so I've found that one-on-one private meetings are helpful. And in addition to just meeting one-on-one, I've found that meeting in a place without distractions is really good. Sometimes we don't always have a choice. We're meeting in a busy spot, or there's no space in the building to meet in a private room. But if possible, I'm arranging something with closed doors. If I'm meeting someone at their apartment, which I often do and I think is really helpful to making them feel comfortable. But some people's apartments, maybe there's the phone's ringing often, or they have family members coming in and out, or I even had one time I met someone at their house, and they had over 20 cats. Made it quite difficult to focus on the interview, and I ended up suggesting that kind of the in-depth stuff we did at my office, which worked really well, because it was just very difficult to keep the conversation on track with little cats all over me while I was talking to her. The other thing I start out with is I'm always very transparent with folks about why I'm getting this information. I think that really helps to build some rapport, just explaining the Social Security process. The reason why I have a couple short meetings before is to start building that rapport and just continue the theme of being transparent. So hopefully by the time I'm sitting down to get all this functional and historical information, people I'm working with really hopefully know the process. They know that I'm on their side. I'm just trying to get them benefits as soon as possible and trying to be very thorough, and that Social Security needs this information in order to make a decision. And I think just that bringing that honesty is really helpful, and I think people are more willing to share and if they know where it's going and why they need it. And just trying not to be judgmental throughout the interview and saying that up front, that just and reiterating, I'm on side, I'm trying to advocate for you, and it isn't about judging past actions and things like that we're just need to get this information. And I always kind of say, just give me all the information and allow me to write it up to Social Security and do that way that's most clear, and try to have them not be stressed out about that kind of stuff, and just let me handle it. Okay. The actual conversation, and I call it a conversation because I think it should really be treated like a conversation, even though when I'm going in, I've got a sheet in front of me with questions on it. It's really important to respond to what's being said. So I'm not just asking, question after question and going on to the next thing. If they say something, the client says something, I'm going to follow up with another question. I'm going to dig a little deeper, and I'm going to respond with other things that aren't just questions. So that may be showing some empathy towards past situation, letting them know that I'm not just someone asking, I'm not just questions and getting answers and writing down the responses. I'm an active engager and participant in this conversation. It's hard. This conversation can be really difficult for folks because it does focus on weaknesses. And I think when you have an opportunity to talk about someone's strengths or talk about how they overcame a difficult situation or how they've moved on to a different chapter in their lives, I think that it's important to reinforce that where appropriate, and make sure that it's not the entire conversation is talking about their worst day. And just, thinking about basic conversation strategies, and one of my favorites is just, I think people are more willing to or it's shown in conversation, if you just kind of repeat back what's said, sometimes, people will just continue talking. So if someone said, oh, yeah, I had a pretty rough childhood with my father, and just for saying, oh, sounds like your father, made childhood pretty rough for you. Leave it at that, and then they'll keep going and say, yeah, they did this. And I think, just using those kind of basic strategies to keep the conversation going, and that you are listening, taking in the information by repeating some of it back. Tailoring the interview style to the client, I think everyone's, just remembering that everyone's different. And some people, the conversation jumps all over the place. It goes around, and I just kind of let them guide the conversation, and I'm maybe flipping through my sheet and writing in different areas and kind of seeing where it goes, whereas some people, respond better to really just going in chronological order, or maybe they're just, I sometimes when I start talking to people, sense that they just are really anxious to get to talking about their conditions. So I might start with that, and then I might go back, and once they've said everything that they really want to say, we'll go back and start talking about their history again, and that way they've already said the things that they were kind of working themselves up to say. I think it's helpful to just kind of let the conversation go and realize that everyone's going to be a bit different. I really avoid yes/no questions. Pretty self-explanatory. I think you'll get more information if you word your questions right. With that said, I think sometimes you don't always need all of the information, and I definitely do use yes or no questions sometimes, particularly if I've got a really disorganized, maybe tangential or circumstantial client in front of me. I might ask some yes or no questions because there is some information that I really need, and unfortunately I don't have hours to spend on the interview. So I will use yes or no questions selectively. If you're like me and sometimes have trouble thinking of non-yes or no questions on the fly, you can always ask a yes or no question and then ask why when they respond, or can you tell me more, please? Things like that I think are great strategies instead of just stressing out about having every question yes or no. Get only the detail that's needed. I think in particular in dealing with sensitive topics, like I said at the beginning, I don't have a clinical background. I don't have an MSW or any credentials, and so I really don't feel qualified to even talk about some topics. And if it's getting really intense, if we're getting into their trauma, if they're starting to show visible symptoms of distress, or they're getting anxious, then I'll just steer the conversation away, and I always let folks know that if they're not comfortable talking about a topic, then we definitely don't need to go there. Also, doing the homework ahead of time allows, gets me to know what I need to get more detail on. I've read the medical records. I know what information I need, and so, I don't need to, if I'm dealing with an older say, gentlemen with some physical health conditions that have only been a problem for the last 5 years, then I really don't need to go in depth into their past and their trauma when they were a child. Like, I really want to focus on what's relevant and not distract, and especially bringing up sensitive information unnecessarily. I think the biggest tip I was given when I started doing this job is just be curious. It's our job to be investigators. And if something said in the interview that doesn't make sense or you want more information, ask about it. This is our chance to get a lot of information, and it's really cool. Also, I mean, we're having a very intimate experience with our clients, and they're sharing a lot with us. And I think we should just be curious, get more information, and I think that'll make for a better MSR. Post-interview. So after the interview, I am certain to write some detailed observations that I haven't written down during the interview. So during the interview, I'm mostly taking down quotes and other information with their permission. Of course, I like that Amanda included that piece when she spoke. And so I'm writing down additional observations when I leave the client meeting. I think a mental status exam can make a good template for them. I have one on computer that I can bring up. It reminds me of all of the different areas that I can be commenting on someone's presentation. So they're like facial affect, their behavior, their mood. And even though I'm not a clinician, this isn't an assessment, or this isn't using clinical terms. I think that the more kind of professional and comprehensive I can be, the better it sounds and the better it comes across. So I think that's a good. I can make a good template. I don't actually include one in the MSR, but I use it to help me write notes. Sometimes talking to people in depth, I realize I don't have all the records I need, so I'll send some requests to some hospitals or clinics, or sometimes I'll have gotten records from a clinic, and in talking with someone, I realize that the clinic only sent me the prescriber notes. They didn't send the case notes, so I always look and make sure I've got all the records I need and send additional requests if needed. I also reach out for collateral information from case managers, doctors, family members, etc. So, making sure that I have a good, complete picture, and that I'm not saying necessarily everything that the client says at face value, as Amanda says, that I'm really doing my best to be an investigator. And I tend to do this after I've gotten information from the client, so I know when I talk to the mother what I need to ask, and I have a background, and I can even ask the mother, like, they report that they cook meals for themselves. They cook dinner for the family every night, and they're able to say, well, actually, they did that once last week, but I helped them, and we measured out things together. So I can kind of reference what I've learned when talking to collateral and sources. So I sit down to write, and I'll just do this briefly. So I agree with Amanda that starting as soon as possible is great. Also, trying to schedule a chunk of time, I find that my MSRs are much better if I can set aside a block of time, a couple hours to write it without interruptions. If I try to do it in half an hour here, half an hour there, 15 minutes there, I find that my finished product is just not as cohesive. It's not as detailed. If I get a couple hours, I can really get in a groove and just start writing. And again, doing it as soon as possible. It's all fresh in your head. You can remember what the facial expressions were. You don't have to rely on your notes, which you then might not understand later. The separating medical records is very important. And actually, when I'm reviewing medical records before, I'm highlighting and tabbing and taking notes so that when I go to write the MSR, I can quickly reference the medical records. So I think that's very helpful. Direct quotes from the client are always very useful, and detailed observations. I try to take as many quotes as I can when I'm talking to folks, and can really help get across to DDs how this person is presenting and what they're saying. Again, just remember, every case is different. I drop sections that don't apply. So if there's no physical health, I'm not going to talk about it. If there's no periods of decompensation that I can identify, I might even just drop that section and focus on the other three, the activities of daily living, social functioning, and concentration, persistence, and pace. So I'll drop sections, or I'll be very brief in some, and I'm really just being intentional on where I'm including the most detail. And again, this goes back to the medical records, what it says, how the client's presenting, and really putting the most detail where there are the most gaps, where I think DDS needs that information the most. So that is pretty much what I've got. And if there's any questions, be happy to answer that at the end.
All right. Thanks so much, Daniel. It's no wonder the best is one of the best SOAR programs in the country. Do that one, sorry. But I really appreciate, what you said about your background and how, people can really do this work if they have the passion for it and the commitment to really become experts. And it's clear that you've done so. And I just want to make sure that message gets across to other folks on the webinar who are, considering kind of taking this on and you're not sure if you can do it because you don't think you have that expertise. It's definitely an expertise that you can build and grow on, and there are supports for you here at the SOAR TA Center and from your colleagues and your peers out in the SOAR world. So don't be afraid. So thank you both to Daniel and us. We're going to do a quick poll question and to see how you guys were listening here. And what we'd like to know is what's a good interviewing technique? Do you pay attention to the applicant's body language? Do you want to meet in a private space? Do you want to show empathy? Or all of the above? So we're going to go ahead and close the poll and see how you guys did. Punching the numbers. And we got a 100% correct score on this, all of the above. So thank you, Daniel and Amanda, for your great information. So I am honored to introduce our next presenter. Brad Stanley is a medical relations officer with the Alabama Disability Determination Services. And the Alabama DDS SOAR team, which includes Brad, recently received a national SSA award in recognition of the quality public service that has contributed to improved communications to agencies that serve the homeless populations. So we want to give a special shout out to Brad, Cynthia Childress, and Ophelia Collins for their excellent partnership. Brad is now going to share a DDS perspective on the medical summary report. Brad?
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Well, you made my job very easy because Jen, Amanda, and Daniel have already talked about everything that really look for as DDS when we're looking at these medical summary reports. And so this will be really just a review. But the two ladies that she mentioned that we received the Deputy Commissioner Team Award, two ladies were the actual two disability specialists here in our office at the DDS here in Birmingham, and they actually do all of the SOAR cases that come into this office. And we're an office that covers the whole state of Alabama, and so those ladies do a ton of exams and a ton of claims that are just SOAR claims. And so I am removed from that. I do something different now, but I have been honored to be able to be part of almost every SOAR training that's been here in Alabama. So I am very closely related to that and still have very close ties to the workers out there that are actually working on SOAR every day. But my portion will be very easy because these three presenters have already really talked about what we need. And really what we're talking about is what are we looking for in the summary report. And just like everyone has said, we're looking for a clear description of treatment in a logical and chronological order. And for a disability specialist or an examiner who's looking at a case, the medical summary report that presented when a case is received it is very important that it shows us the treatment history, and it gives us a starting point as we begin to look at a claimant's background and what's been going on with them. So it's going to give us that in a logical and chronological order. It's going to talk about their hospitalizations, both at the past, current hospitalizations, and to include ER visits. And for us, and I know a lot of places maybe focus only on the mental component, but when we look at the mental component, we're really looking at a longitudinal history. We need to see when a person may have been diagnosed with a specific mental disorder, and we need to see how that has affected them throughout their life. And that can include a physical impairment as well as a mental impairment. And as everyone has touched on, how important function is. Function. And we need that functional information, because it is true that we never actually see the claimant. We talk to the claimant here at our office in Alabama. We probably talk to the claimant a lot more than some disability offices throughout the nation, but we don't ever get to actually see a claimant. And so what you provide to us as far as function goes really gives us an insight on what the claimant can and can't do, and it is imperative that we get that information in order to make a decision. And so when we're looking at the medical information that is provided in the MSR, we're really looking at a snapshot of the claimant's treatment history. And so you can show us that, as a child or as a young adult, a claimant may have been diagnosed with something. There may have been an initial hospitalization, and they have been multiple hospitalizations or a multiple treatment history since then. And it gives us great detail showing the longitudinal effects of how that illness or impairment has affected a claimant and how it has impacted their ability to do day-to-day functions, their ability to do work-related activity. And so that information is very important to us as disability examiners. And for us here in the Alabama DDS, really provides a starting point for disability examiners or specialists, those that are actually working on those cases. It provides them a starting point to go ahead and here in Alabama, we have medical consultants that work in our office who are MDs and PhDs and psychiatrists, and it gives us something for us to go to them and say, hey, this is a claimant that I just have received information on, and I have this summary report already in here that gives me his treatment history, and it gives me his functional information and what he can and can't do, and we can go ahead and begin to formulate what may be in how much more information we may need in order to get a decision made. And that is our to make sure that we are making timely decisions, but not only are we making them timely, we're making the correct decision. And so this really begins that process for us here in Alabama. We can take that and begin to look and see what gaps may be in there and what things we may need in order to make a decision. And so the medical information is really self-explanatory. That is information that we know that we're going to request, but can be provided to us in a logical order so we can see what's been going on with the claimant. But really, the next thing that we're looking at is function, and function is really the cornerstone of what we need in order to tie the medical and the functional portion together to see if a claimant meets the definition of disability. And lots of times when we're talking about this section of the population, this group of people who may be homeless, we need information because they move around so much, and that is something that we can't get. That is a very imperative portion of the disability claim that is usually left out. It is so very important for y'all as representatives of this population to provide this information for us, and it gives us the information that we need. And so you have a unique opportunity to shed light on how an individual, whether it's a medical condition or a psychological condition, affects his or her daily activities. And so we want you to provide that information to us. Again, you are going to have interaction with this client, and you are going to see them if not on a daily basis, but probably on maybe a weekly or even a monthly basis. And so you're going to be able to give us information on whether or not they get along with people, or whether or not every time you go see them, you have to reintroduce yourself to them, and they're still very they're nervous and they don't understand why you're there to see them. And so that information helps us as we begin to look at the medical and put those two things together. And this functional information really provides information on how restrictive an impairment is. We really focus on mental impairments, but as we look at both physical and mental, if someone has a debilitating physical condition, it can be very restricted in what a claimant can and can't do on a normal day, and may require some assistance in able to do just really basic day-to-day activities. And so information can be provided to us through functional information that is on the MSR. And again, just like everyone says, because we don't see the claimant, this insight is what we need to show how these impairments impacts a claimant every day. And so that's what we're looking to get when we're looking at the MSR. And function is such a big part of it. As a disability examiner, I did the SOAR cases here in Alabama, and we a claimant who was a SOAR claim, and he was really his medical was kind of bad, and he had filled out his function report for us. We mail out, the DDS mails out, but yet we didn't have enough. He was kind of on in the middle of the road. He was not quite far enough to say, okay, we're going to be able to allow this claimant, but not quite bad enough that we would not try to allow him, or his benefits would be denied. But because of the social worker that I worked with and was his 1696 representative, she provided her MSR that gave us such a look into his day-to-day situation. The fact that on his medical his function report, he told us that he lived with someone. He had a roommate, but provided that he lived with a roommate, but yet he was so paranoid that he thought the roommate was going to kill him. He felt that his life was in danger, although he was living with this roommate. And so the information gave us enough of a to say, hey, this person has significant problems, and so we need to probably give him benefits. And so that function information alone that she provided was enough for us to move that claimant into an area where we had enough information functionally and medically in order to make him an allowance. So it's very important that function is given. And we've talked about the things that we're looking at function-wise, but psychologically we're looking at is the claimant able to follow instructions? Does the claimant respond well to changes in their environment? With mental conditions, some claimants have a very hard time when their routine is off or when routine is changed. And so we need to know how someone reacts to that, because in look at that in terms of work-related activities, you may be on a job and they may say, hey, I need you to go over here today and I need you to do this. Well, someone who doesn't respond well to change is going to have a very difficult time, and they may act negative way when they do that. And so that's what we're looking for. We're looking to, are they able to get along with each other, well with one another? If they're in a group home setting, are they to be separated out because they cause trouble within a group home or within a group of peers because they just don't get along well with others? Do you require encouragement to complete tasks? That's one of the questions that's on the function report, but that's an important question. If someone needs additional encouragement to do something, they can do it, but yet because of the condition they just don't feel motivated to do it. Well, that's information that we need to know. It takes longer for them to complete a task. Yes, this client of mine can clean their house up, but it takes 3 days for them to clean the house up. And so we need to know those specific things. You know, are they able to concentrate and stay on task for an extended period of time? Those things will help us as we look at the medical and as we put those things together to see where the claimant may be as far as the definition of disability and whether or not they meet that criteria. And I wanted to include the physical thing we're looking at too, because we get both the physical and the mental together as we're developing claims. We don't develop those separately here in Alabama, and probably most places don't do that. And so we want to include the physical. If someone has a physical impairment, we want to make sure that it's included, and I don't want you to diminish physical symptoms that you may notice. So if a claimant or a client comes in and they're limping, or they use a cane or a walker or a wheelchair, they have trouble standing and walking, they have fatigue, can have to stop. They may be, help you in an interview, or you're interviewing them, but yet they're very fatigued and they need to stop. That may be a sign of a physical problem, and so we need to note that. Ever can notice any problems with lifting and carrying, problems with bending and stooping, or problems using their hands. Someone with arthritis, they may have difficulty riding, picking up small objects, something like that. And so don't ever think that the physical portion is not important. And so it's very important that we include both of those when we're reading the MSR. And so really that's it. Y'all have really done a good job to cover everything that I needed to say. So if y'all have any questions, I'm here. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Brad. We really appreciate your insights and your great collaboration. So we still have a few minutes left for questions, and so we're going to open the floor for that. There are two ways to ask a question. You can either type your question into the Q&A panel, which is located under the participant tab, and maybe you have already found that. And to ask a question by phone, you can raise your hand by clicking the hand icon. It's in the participant pod, and we can unmute you. So we'll try to fit in as many questions as we can. Anything that we don't get to, if typed it in, we'll get in touch with you, and we'll make sure to get those questions answered. All right, we're going to turn to PRA, and if you'll share one of those questions from the Q&A box.
Hi, everyone. So we have a couple of questions that came into the Q&A box that we can share with you. One of them is there a minimum number? Is there a minimum number of medical records that are needed to submit? Is there a minimum of medical records that need to be submitted? I have a couple of clients who have no medical reports because they have no insurance to keep their office visits.
Great, thanks. So any of our presenters want to grab that question, what to do if someone doesn't have medical evidence?
Well, Amanda, I would just say that the medical summary report becomes that much more important when you don't have medical evidence, especially if you can get it co-signed by the who is seeing the time, because like was mentioned earlier, the MSR is really to fill in those gaps. And if you have records, then you're kind of filling in all the gaps and really shows, what's happening so that they can see something on paper because there is nothing.
Hey, and this is Brad. And really from the DDS standpoint, we wish and we would rather make decisions using a claimant's treating physician information, because you're talking about better quality medical record because they have a treating relationship with that claimant. But we know that there's a lot of claimants that may have any medical, and so we do not order consultative examinations, but those can be beneficial of a well-written MSR, and payments still could possibly be allowances even though they may have a very spotty or may not have any treatment at all.
Great. There are a number of questions that are related to how to discuss and talk about an applicant's drug and alcohol use, or for folks who have substance use disorders. So how you address that. And the questions were asked in lots of different ways, but I think that it all can be kind of addressed together. So anyone want to jump in?
I can start with some of my suggestions. Definitely, when I'm interviewing for my MSRs, I definitely make it up to bring that up with people and ask, try to be non-judgmental about it. I think people get really self-conscious. Again, just affirming that, it's your job to get this information across in the best way to Social Security, and that the most complete information you have, the better. And just getting at, how did those substances make you feel? What were you drawn to those substances? Getting at, maybe there were symptoms or situations that they were hiding from, like some past trauma or underlying mental health conditions, or maybe self-medicating, really trying to get at that. I also found it really helpful to just do best to get a timeline of maybe where were some periods of sobriety. They have been clean and sober for 3 months when I'm talking to them, but 6 months clean and sober just 9 months ago, a year ago, and really getting that information and then referencing that in my MSR and referencing which medical records relate to period. So then bringing in the medical records of when they were clean and sober and what symptoms and presentation was happening back then. And also, if there's any mention in the medical records about substance use, really trying to address that, in particular if providers are noting that they appear to be clean and sober at that visit. I like to reference that, or mentioning clean time, or sometimes people are required to get UAs mentioning those results. So just if that's an issue, I try to just address it all the way around and be comprehensive and in the best way.
And just to add to that, what we've tried to do with some of the facilities that we work with in the community, some of them are actually including the court as well. Some places drug testing, and you ask ahead of time, let them know that you need documentation of that. We've had places provide documentation to show the results of the drug test. So even if there's one that's positive in the last 5 months, but the rest of them in the last 5 months are negative for any substances, it shows that, they're making the attempt to be sober, and the records will show that they're still experiencing symptoms of mental health or whatever it is, whatever. So that tends to help also sometimes.
Great, both. So it does look we've got about a minute left, so we are out of time for today for the questions, but we are keeping track of all the questions that came in the box, and we will back to you. To our presenters again for sharing not only your experiences, but also reminding us really why we do this work. So a quick reminder, please complete the brief evaluation of the webinar that you will get. And for more information on this topic, you can visit our website, soarworks.preinc.com. You can email us at soarworks@preinc.com, and we'll be sure to get all of your questions answered. And thank you, and have a great afternoon, everyone.